It is 6:30, Thursday, May 10th, 2018, and this we are calling to order the Public Health Hospital District Number 4 King County Board of Commissioners regular meeting. Could we have a flag salute? Shall we all stand for the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could the clerk please read the roll?
President Norris?
Here.
Vice President Herron?
Here.
Secretary Spikers? Anyone?
Don't know.
Okay. Commissioner Pollard?
Here.
Commissioner Young? Here.
Do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda?
I make that motion.
I second. Is there any discussion? Carrie?
Just a point of order, I checked at the post office just before I came, and the posting does not mention the executive session. It's no big deal because the public can't come anyway, but the agenda and the posting should always be the same. Just a point of information.
Thank you, Commissioner
That
Pollard.
was inadvertent.
Pardon?
That was inadvertent if that's the case.
Okay. All
My
right.
apologies.
Alrighty, so we have a first and a second, shall we vote? All those in favor say aye for approval of the agenda.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposing. Okay. We now have scheduled an executive session to discuss a legal counsel, with legal counsel potential or action on litigation involving the district. So how long are we thinking we're going to need?
Your submission is in your packet.
Oh, read the whole thing? Got it. Thank you.
Let's see.
The Board of Commissioners will now go into an executive session. The purpose of tonight's executive session is to discuss with our legal counsel potential or actual litigation involving the district as authorized by RCW 42.30.110I. It is anticipated that the executive session will be concluded in approximately 20 minutes. No action will be taken during the executive session. And I would like the record to read that Commissioner Spikers has entered the room and he's with us.
Sorry I'm late.
So I will now dismiss the public for executive session. Snoqualmie Valley Hospital District Number 4 is reconvening after an executive session. It is now 6:56. Next on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment this evening? Hearing none, we will move on. Communications. I had one that I think everybody got a copy of, but I just wanted to point out this balancing act of managing outcomes and costs for Medicare and Medicaid populations, seeing as that's what we have in our hospital district. There was an email, I think others got it. I think it came in with Becker's report, but I'm not sure. But some of the things it says that I thought were really interesting. Population health initiatives typically assume that members can participate in their own care on a basic level. For example, arriving at medical appointments, picking up prescriptions, and taking medications as directed. Yet, those assumptions may not hold true for Medicare and Medicaid members. Their lives differ from lives of those with commercial insurance, which makes cost-effective care management uniquely challenging and even more important. Goes on to say that the issues of many people 65 and older are that they have memory loss, inability to drive, which can compromise their care plan adherence. 63% of the people over the age of 50 must choose between purchasing food or medical care. Social economic challenges, we will all face those. Case in point, as recently as 2015, roughly 9.1 million adults with Medicaid had a mental illness and more than 3 million had substance abuse disorder. I didn't know that it was that prevalent in that age group. Medicare, Medicaid member populations are growing rapidly. Approximately 10,000 people will reach age 65 each day through 2019, most of them joining the ranks of Medicare enrollees. Step one, this is a couple quick steps that they say. I'm not going to read all the information about them. But step one would be identify and stratify Medicare and Medicaid populations. 2, take action with analytics-driven interventions. 3, measure and report will drive further improvement, and individualized approach for government populations. Managing Medicare and Medicaid populations requires an individualized and member-centric approach by identifying and addressing the unique needs of Medicare and Medicaid members sooner. Care managers can drive more effective interventions that reduce readmissions and overall care costs. So just some food for thought, and I think most of us on here are approaching that. Yes, Commissioner Collier.
Would that be part of our minutes, number 1, and number 2? Could you send a copy to me and perhaps other commissioners, because I didn't get it?
Sure, yeah.
And rather than to try to describe it, we just have that part of the minutes so that you compare this report to the board. Just a suggestion.
However people want to do it. It's just part of my information, something that I found that I wanted to share with the board, so it's on the tape. I don't know how we... Yeah, okay. And maybe afterwards Val can copy this if you want it, or I can send it from home.
Could you just send us an email attachment with that?
Mm-hmm.
Because, we get so many of those emails from Fierce, this, that, and all of the various providers that if this is just one of the little articles, which we probably couldn't find,
Yeah, I just thought, considering that's our caseload oftentimes of Medicare,
Well, I'm
Medicaid.
glad you brought it to our attention.
All righty, is there any other questions or thoughts? All righty, then Superintendent Parker.
Thank you. You have a copy of my report, and I will go through it as usual. Starting with our affiliation strategy, I have had follow-up meetings with representatives of Evergreen Health, Multi-Care Health System, Overlake Medical Center, Virginia Mason, and UW Medicine. Organizations that we continue to work with are Overlake, Virginia Mason, and UW Medicine. Each of those 3 have expressed interest in reviewing our financial results for 2017 once the cost report and audit are complete. The scope of potential affiliation models will depend on each organization's review and assessment of our updated financial performance. I have also discussed our affiliation strategy with those individuals who were recommended by the board. That was at our work study session, and I've received helpful advice on process and strategy from them. Our financial report tonight will show that in March, there was a net income of $123,000 compared to a budgeted net income of $33,000. Unrestricted cash declined to $8.9 million due to the fact that we had 3 pay periods in the month. Remember, that happens twice a year. Year to date, our net income is $348,000 compared to a budget of $104,000. Compared to a budgeted loss of $104,000. That's a favorable variance of $452,000. Our average daily census in March was 23.3 compared to our budget of 22. That's an occupancy rate of 93%. ED was busy in March with 346 visits, 3% over budget. Operating expenses were on budget in March and are 2% under budget year to date. Looking ahead at April, our average daily census in April was 24.5. That's almost as full as you can get. ED visits were lower though in April, 286 compared to our budget of 302. I'd like to talk about some of the work we do in emergency services. Stop the Bleed training was held in March for the Snoqualmie Valley School District. This training was provided by the hospital and the Snoqualmie Fire Department to instruct school nurses in life-saving techniques used by first responders to treat victims of gunshot wounds in the field. We have also reached out to the Riverview School District to provide training for their nurses as well. Our 340B drug program. We've completed the first month of operation for the program. The financial impact will begin to show in our April financial statements. Again, with Rural Health Clinic, nothing new there. We are still anticipating and waiting on our unannounced survey. I'd like to talk about the WISHA CEO and Trustee Patient Safety Summit that some of us were able to attend. That was last week. The topics were employee burnout and equity in the workplace. The executive team is now reviewing the easy-to-use smartphone-based tools that were provided at the conference. We'll have more to talk about this as we look at using those tools, particularly the ones around staff burnout and resiliency. I should note that I serve on the Riverview School District's resiliency team, and it was very fortunate that our meeting came just after this, and I oriented that group to the tool, and it may be something that they want to deploy in the schools. Oh, of course.
Emma and I were both there, and it was different than any other, and Joan, yeah, it was different than the other meetings that they'd done. The speakers were excellent.
Yeah.
Two very different speakers with very different approaches, but worked together perfectly. Did you say, John?
Good
Okay,
talk.
Emma?
Yeah, the day session was really great. It just talks about burnout among healthcare professionals, and the afternoon session talks about disparities. So it really was disparities in healthcare.
Healthcare equity.
So it covered. So it was a very nice way of looking at overall,
Very bright.
that relates to patient safety, of course.
Yeah. Very bright people that
Very,
shared.
yes.
I'm
Very
sorry.
different.
No, it's great.
Sorry, yeah, we just wanted to.
Yeah. And one
Chime in.
of the things that we translated from that is asking ourselves the question on the equity topic.
Yeah.
Make sure that we really understand whether or not access to care is limited based on protected classes.
Right.
So that's some of the work that we're launching now. I think everybody believes that they're doing a really good job of it, but it takes some effort to know for sure. Swing bed instruction. On Tuesday this week, representatives from Peace Health United General Medical Center came here to learn about the operation of our swing bed program. It was a great opportunity for us to talk to them about what we have accomplished over the years and made us realize that the operation of a program such as the swing bed program is something that evolves and improves over time, and it was a great opportunity to look back on the accomplishments that we had made over the past 5 or 6 years. Our April work study session is coming up on, that should say May, my apologies. May work study session, May 23rd. Our topics are going to be the Washington Rural Healthcare Collaborative Annual Report and an affiliation update. I'm excited for you to hear about everything that has been accomplished last year with the collaborative, the cost savings that we have realized because of our work within the collaborative, and the commitments that Steve, Dr. Wyckoff, and I make to helping the collaborative be successful. And finally, this week is Healthcare Week, and we're holding our traditional Friday barbecue. Please come tomorrow if you can. It's held here in this room from noon to 1. Come and celebrate with our staff. And take any questions.
Anybody have any questions for
Commissioner Pollard?
the chair? Recognizes Commissioner Pollard.
On the item called May work study, etc., the topics are Washington Rural Health Collaborative Annual Report and affiliation update. That's not our affiliation. What affiliation is that?
That's the work that so I covered affiliation briefly in this report. I would imagine that I'll have more. I want to be able to have some good, robust discussion with the board at the work study session.
Oh, okay, so that's a separate topic.
Separate topic,
Washington Rural
correct.
Health.
2 topics that evening.
Okay, I got you.
Okay.
And then the other question is the matter of equity. I'm still troubled by the fact that we have kind of a quota for Medicaid patients. And it would seem to me that if any institution is going to serve the most financially challenged patients, it should be a public hospital district. and yet we steer clear of admitting Medicaid patients because of our financial situation. I'm trying to clarify whether that's even legal. In other words, should it be first come, first served regardless of reimbursement type? Are we obliged to take more Medicaid patients? So I'm trying to clarify that with Medicare or CMS. But it does trouble me that we turn away the people that seem to have the greatest need because of their source of payment and the amount that's being paid under that source.
I understand that. We have taken we've taken the position that we budget for a certain amount of Medicaid days, and we currently do have Medicaid days. We don't have a zero Medicaid day budget. We do budget for some, and we manage to that. We are allowed to have admission criteria based on payer class, based on the match clinically for those patients, and we exercise that in the swing bed program. You do not, though, have that ability when it comes to emergency services.
I understand that.
And we take all who come in through our door, and many of those patients are Medicaid.
Or self-pay.
Or have no pay, exactly, no pay, self-pay.
Yeah.
So we do serve this community, and when you think about the number of encounters that we have with members of the community, the vast majority of them are through our emergency department and the outpatient services that we provide in our ancillary departments. So we do a lot of Medicaid here.
Now, once a person comes to the emergency department, let's say a person that would otherwise qualify for Medicaid, they go through the emergency department, then they can come in with better reimbursement, is that correct?
They will continue in Medicaid status regardless.
Oh, they then switch over to Medicaid status when they go into a swing bed?
No, so if they come into the door, they're an Apple Health or if they're an Apple Health
They
Medicaid,
come into the ED is what I'm talking about.
come into the ED, their payer class, their payer status is Medicaid. And for all services that they receive, even if they are admitted to the inpatient unit as an acute care patient.
Would they typically be admitted as an acute care patient first before a swing bed?
Absolutely, absolutely they will. You wouldn't go from ED to swing, you'd go from ED to acute, and if they needed further help after their acute phase, they could be admitted then as a swing bed patient, but their payer status would be the same throughout as Medicaid.
So the amount of revenue we get from that specific payment would be at the Medicaid level.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a problem because what is our quote-unquote quota of budgeted?
Our budgeted Medicaid days are 30 days per month.
Okay, so if we have one person who has been there for two or 3 years, eating up that one bed, what then? Does that mean we have no more beds that month?
That is, regardless of the length of stay of any one Medicaid patient, if we have one bed occupied through the month, then we have met our budgeted number of Medicaid days.
And so if that bed is being occupied by someone who's been here for 3 years, there's no empty bed there for a new Medicaid patient.
No, that's not true, because let me just explain this. If they come in as an emergency Medicaid patient, and they end up in acute care for a day or two, and they end up in swing bed status for a week rehabilitation or 2 weeks, we'll take care of them.
We will
There's
exceed
no
our
issue
Medicaid
about
days
that.
budget.
Our budget is one, but it would be over budget for the 2 weeks.
For that time, during that time.
Oh, so it would be over
David.
budget, that is under budget in the sense of reimbursement.
Right.
For that 2-week period.
Mm-hmm.
We would take care of them.
Correct.
But they would not add revenue as a Medicare patient would.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I was missing that point. If they came through the ED, if that was their source.
That's what I was trying to say.
Absolutely, they would go to the inpatient unit. We'd be over budget for Medicaid days.
And we're willing to do that.
Oh, we do do that.
And keep in mind, many, if not half, of the patients that come here through our swing bed program are from out of the outside of the Snoqualmie Valley.
Yeah.
Outside of the hospital district.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you very much. It just, still, I feel troubled by our financial inability or whatever to accept more Medicaid patients, and only to kind of focus on what we have budgeted for, which may be sound financially, but in terms of empathy and the moral issue, I just think a public hospital district should be open to the least of these.
My last comment is I agree with that. And we have found what we believe is a balance with the one Medicaid average daily census, because we could actually do better financially if we said none.
I realize that, and that would be morally indefensible.
And if you look at other larger hospitals, 250 bed hospitals, my guess is they probably have more, or probably have not, they probably don't have 10 Medicaid patients sitting there. That's my guess.
I don't know.
And so if you're looking at 25 beds and we have one, that's a large percentage as compared to a large hospital. But if they have 5, it's less.
Less impact.
Interesting, comparison. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Superintendent Tom Parker? Hearing none, then we'll move on to Steve Daniel, our Chief Financial Officer.
Talk about this.
Well, I guess I had the wrong sheet in front of me.
I know that he goes home every night and falls asleep reading Robert's rules.
Who does?
So good evening, Commissioners and Madam President. So you always give me the opportunity to learn and identify how much I don't know about Robert's Rules of Order. There's so many pieces to this. At your last board meeting, I believe it was either Secretary Spikers or Commissioner Pollard that moved a motion and then withdrew it. And so that got me to thinking about, well, when can you withdraw your motion and how do you go about that? How do you get recognized? So that's your topic for tonight. And that is a request for permission or leave to withdraw or modify a motion. So it's kind of a before and after. So your request, if it's before the body, it's pretty simple. Conditions for withdrawing or modifying a motion depend on how soon the mover states his wish to withdraw or modify. Permission for him to do so is required only after the motion to which it pertains has been stated by the chair as pending. So, before the motion's been stated by the chair, it's the property of the mover. So if you've moved it, then it's still your property. You can withdraw it. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry, Skip, to interrupt you.
Yes.
I think my document's a little bit different than the topic you're covering, and I just want to make sure that all of us, include, the commissioners.
Make sure you get the right one.
This is, I've run on maximum time.
Yeah, that's last month's.
Okay.
Incidental motion.
Does everybody have the right one then?
Tom, you need a refresher?
I think that's what our counsel was telling me.
Yeah, that was the maximum time for speech, I think.
Okay. Thank you,
So
Skip.
as Secretary Spector pointed out, I put these on yellow paper so I keep track of them, but I didn't number them by when they were presented.
Date them.
So again, before a motion's been stated by the chair, so before your president says anything about it, the property then, it belongs to the mover, belongs to the maker of the motion, and you can withdraw it or you can modify it without consent of anyone. So in that little brief interval between the making of a motion and the time when the chair places it before your body, you simply say, Madam President, I withdraw my motion.
Question,
Yes.
you haven't mentioned seconding.
Well,
If it's not seconded, then it still remains the property of the.
It's still the property of the mover.
Okay. I just didn't hear you mention it. After it is seconded, however, then it becomes a matter for the board president.
Well, I'll address that here in just a second.
All right.
Or you could say it, who made the motion, you say, Madam President, Mr. President, I wish to modify the motion by striking out demand, inserting urge. So you could modify or you could withdraw prior to it being stated as a motion. So here's your question, Mr. Pollard, Commissioner Pollard. In the same interval also, another member can ask if the maker of the motion is willing to withdraw it or accept it, a change in it, which suggests the maker can accept or reject. In such a case, the chair either announces the motion has been withdrawn. So you could have somebody else other than the maker say, Commissioner Pollard, would you withdraw that? And then he says, yeah, I'll withdraw it. If a motion is modified, the seconder, this is your question, Commissioner Pollard, can withdraw his second. So it's modified. When the seconder withdraws his second to the modified motion, the member who suggested the modification has in effect supplied the second.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yes, I found that interesting, that's why I said I'm always learning more. So what happens though if the chair has recognized the motion now? Well, now you have a separate process. After it's been stated by the chair, whatever the motion is, this is the question before you, it belongs now to the meeting as a whole. It no longer belongs to the mover. And the maker must request permission to withdraw or modify according to the rules stated above. So to withdraw a motion that is before the assembly, before the board now, the member who made it may use this form. The member would say, Madam President, I ask permission or leave to withdraw the motion, because now it's owned by the body. The chair treats this as a unanimous consent request. That is, if no one objects, the announcement is said by the chair. Unless there's an objection, the motion is withdrawn. So it can be withdrawn. Madam President, I ask that I withdraw my motion. I know it's before the body now. Not hearing any objection, the President grants your request. It's withdrawn.
So the decision of the seconder is irrelevant.
It is irrelevant at that point.
If there is an objection.
Now, if there's an objection and your president is moving ahead, now she wants to know what happens if somebody objects. I don't want it withdrawn. If there's an objection, the chair, on his own accord, and again, I apologize, but this is how Robert writes. It's usually it's his and he, but at times we do get Madam President in there. They can put the question on granting the request, or any member can move that permission to withdraw the motion be granted. If a member other than the one making the request made the motion, it does not require a second, since the maker of the motion to grant permission and the maker of the request surely both favor it, so it can be withdrawn. A request for permission to withdraw a motion or a motion to grant such permission can be made at any time before voting. Now that's the critical thing. If you've taken a vote, you can't withdraw it, then you're going to have another motion separate. Even though the motion has been amended, and even though subsidiary or incidental motions may be pending, again, any such motions that adhere to the main motion cease to be before the assembly and require no further disposition if the main motion is withdrawn. Any member can suggest that the maker of a motion asks permission to withdraw it, which the maker can do or decline to do so as he chooses. So Commissioner Pollard could say, Secretary Spiker, would you withdraw your motion? You can choose to do that, or you can decline to do that. After the question's been divided, we probably don't have to address that. That one little sentence, though, after a motion has been withdrawn, the situation as though it had never been made. Therefore, the same motion can be made again at the same meeting. It's as if it never happened, so you could do it again and start over. Now, I'm not going to address tonight because you've given me 5 minutes of your time to do these each meeting, but when I come back, we'll talk about how to modify the motion after it's been stated by the chair. Basically, modification and or an amendment. There's a difference between modifying a motion and amending a motion. And you'll have to come back next month to hear about that.
You can hardly wait.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. Thank you.
That's probably going to be a very useful, because we do that from time to time.
We do. Yeah.
Modify.
So the way you do it is you have to be recognized by the
Modify.
president, and then you make your request to fellow commissioners modify or withdraw or whatever, right? Okay, so it goes through the chair. All right, got it.
So, okay, we're now down to a consent agenda, approval of the minutes for April 12th, 2018 regular meeting and April 25th, 2018 work study meeting. Do I have, and physician credentialing.
I would like to remove those from the consent agenda and handle them individually.
The approval of the minutes?
Yeah.
Is that a motion?
One person may allow it to come on.
Okay. Then we will do them one at a time. April 12th, 2018 regular meeting. Is there any changes or to those minutes? Commissioner Pollard.
Yeah, I really appreciate Mr. Spiker's apology and so forth about not showing up. But I don't think we have a procedure yet for what is excused and what is unexcused. And I would prefer that that just be absent rather than excused, because the board took no action to excuse Mr. Spiker's at that time.
Okay,
I
and
don't think you'll object.
President Norris did say that he was excused on the record.
Pardon?
President Norris did say he was excused on the
Well,
record.
President Norris does not have authority to excuse him. She's an individual council member. I think the Robert's rules could speak to that.
We'll have a topic for that, I'm sure, next, as to whether you can excuse or not. And I
And if
can't,
so, who does it? Whether
Exactly.
it can be the chair, it has to be the body. So the fact that Commissioner President might have mentioned excuse, I don't recall that, we'd have to listen.
Are we talking about the work study?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I think that's because he was talking to me, he was doing the barbecue, and so I said.
Yeah,
"It has to be."
it's not a criticism. I think that the term absent is a neutral term, just
I didn't think-
stating the fact.
I didn't think that work studies workshop were mandatory.
And that's a good question all around.
No meeting is mandatory.
There is a.
No, there's
a provision in
mandatory on
bylaws
the board.
regarding
Yeah.
consistent attendance at meetings. And
Consistent
when we put in
attendance.
I do recall when we added bylaws, or excuse me, added work study, we did not add it as a required meeting.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right.
Board meetings are required.
Might I?
We should look at
Work
that.
studies
We
are
will
not.
have to review that part, yeah.
Because we keep record, and if somebody misses so many times without.
Yeah, that's in the
That's correct,
bylaws,
and
and
that's
about
why
like
we
6
need-
times, I think, or something like that, yeah.
That's why we need, perhaps in the bylaws, to identify,
We
as
will,
other
yeah.
organizations have,
Yeah.
what is excused and what is not excused.
Should we even define absent and excuse or tardiness? Is that something that needs to be on the bylaws?
I'm going to bring it to your ad hoc bylaws committee
Yes,
meeting,
thank
at the next
you.
meeting, and we'll really address that.
It
Yeah.
seems
Commissioner
like we're
Pollard,
becoming too-
If
yeah.
you would like to, do you want to make a motion about that? Do you at this time?
I would prefer that it be referred to the bylaws committee
Okay.
for consideration, along with the superintendent, and come up with something. I know I did research this a bit, and I have seen other organizations where they specify what are excused absences. You know, things like traffic accident, emergency, family illness, this sort of thing. But just not showing up is not an excused
It was a
absence.
scheduling issue, that's what it was.
In this case, it was a scheduling issue, but that is not, I think by this time, we all know that the work-study session falls on a certain time. And although it may not be in the formal schedule of meetings that we promulgate on our website,
It is.
I think it would be normally expected that all commissioners would come to work-study sessions.
Well, and that's something we need to discuss too
Yeah.
then, is whether it's required or whether it's optional.
Yes.
Another good item for the bylaws.
Yeah, and for us to discuss when we actually go through the bylaws as a group and decide.
Yeah, I think a
Call for the
work-study
question,
session
the
on the
motion,
bylaws
yes.
would be indicated, and we can kick these
Yes,
things
you know.
around.
All
Thank
right,
you.
so do we have any motion?
FYI, I just want to say, I did meet with CEO Parker about all of the things we talked about. I actually was able to ask some questions of Dr. Whitcock at the finance meeting related to the work-study session. So, and I did, so I did overview everything that was talked about.
Right, so you were definitely present at the finance committee meeting.
Yes.
I hope so. I went there the day before. That's how mixed up my schedule was, because they switched it from Tuesday to Wednesday. So I was there on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes for April 12th regular meeting and April 25th, 2018 work study?
There's a motion that he, there's a motion. that-
I move that we approve the minutes of the work-study session
Yeah.
with the proviso that Mr. Spikers, and this is nothing personal,
Starting to take it.
the note there that says he's excused, just say, render that as absent. And that's my motion, if the rest of the board would agree to that.
Do I have a second for that motion? Well, then, if I don't have a second, then we can't have that motion. Do we have another motion to approve the minutes? Well, if we don't have a motion, they're not approved.
I'm gonna say,
Do you want to say
Are we talking on
something?
B, work study now? Are we on work study or are we on regular meeting?
We have the regular meeting. We were
Both?
going to do a consent agenda for both. Do you want to
Okay.
separate them out? First, we can do April 12th, regular meeting.
So that's what we started.
Madam President, I'll just recall that on one of your Robert's Rules meetings, reminders that we had identified a formal motion to approve the minutes is not necessary, although such a motion is not out of order. So after the minutes have been distributed, you can say, are there any corrections? And if you don't have any, you can accept the minutes as have been mailed.
Do we have a correction?
I would like to change the designation of Mr. Spiker's participation that night as absent for the record.
Okay, now, do we have to vote on that? I would think we would, wouldn't we?
Yes.
Okay, so you're making a motion. Do I have a second?
But just for clarification, my understanding was he was excused
By whom?
by the press.
Well, when I talked to him on the phone, yeah, I did excuse him. I wasn't going to make him come down here.
I'm just suggesting.
But he's saying I can't do that.
The board president doesn't have the authority on her
Yeah,
own
that's
to
what he said.
excuse because.
Not her, any board president. We don't have that authority.
Yeah, exactly.
Skip, I'm allowed a point of order?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Point of order.
but
And that is that you, just where you are, you did have a motion that did not get a second, and there was no, so it didn't go forward. You asked again for a motion, and you received a motion, but you have not received a second. So I don't know if it's okay to go into discussion until you have a second on the
the
motion.
motion is not for the body because there's been no second. And,
That's a good point.
and that second was to,
Discussion.
modify it.
No, it was a motion, not a second.
That's correct.
No second.
So you have a motion, you do not have a second, so it's not time for discussion until you have a second.
okay.
You of course.
I will second it. I will second that motion. I think the question now is that whether we change it to say excused or not. I did say at that meeting that I excused him, and I think Val's writing it as it happened.
That's correct.
So either we accept that that's what happened and maybe that was not the best, and we need to reconsider that I probably shouldn't have done that because he didn't talk to me ahead, but I wasn't, I just figured what else could we do? So if we want to correct how we do that in the future and say that you cannot, in the bylaws, make sure that if somebody is late and we have to call them and they're not in traffic and it's not something that they can.
Yeah, I think.
Point of order. What are you seconding?
I'm seconding the motion
The motion that it just be identified as absent.
for the edit.
All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. So we can at least discuss it and then decide whether we're going to vote on it or not.
My take on this is that since there is no clarity or any specifics on our bylaws about tardy or absence or excuse, I think this is the first time we should just kind of, more like forgiven until we have it in our bylaws, so that we all have we're all reading the same page. But for now, since there's no set guidelines about tardiness or absences or excuses there are some absences in terms of the number of times you miss a meeting, but in terms of excuse, there's nothing on our bylaws right now. So that's,
Chair
It's a
recognizes Commissioner Young.
I'm having a little bit of a challenge because the motion is to approve the meeting. It's not to approve who is there or not there.
No, the motion is to correct the minutes,
Correct.
to change the minutes from excused to absent. That's the motion that's been seconded. That's the motion before your body.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with approving.
It does have to do with approving the minutes, because the minutes say I said that he was excused, and Commissioner Pollard feels that I do not have the authority to do that, which is, may or may not be the case.
Clarification.
Yeah. So then it's whether we're going to edit.
correct.
Edit those minutes to say something different, or whether we leave them the way they are.
I say leave them the way they are for now. And we can take a vote, right?
Can you
for the
unapprove minutes that
approve
you've
the
already
correction,
approved?
or not
You have not approved
You
these
do not
minutes.
approve that's
I
what's
know.
before the body now.
So how about if we leave it? I would like to make a suggestion. Can we?
You have a motion.
Well, you have a motion
There's a
and it's
motion.
before the
All
body
right.
that needs to be
You need
addressed.
to vote on it at some point.
And do we have a second on that motion?
You were it.
You did.
I was it. Okay, let's vote on the, and could you rephrase your,
Well, I'd just like to comment, I know what you're trying to do is well-intentioned, and it's no big deal, it's kind of impedimenta. But I think you did not have the authority to excuse, to indicate that Mr. Spikers was excused because he had not given any indication that he wasn't going to be there, etc. He didn't show up. So
Actually, I did. I said the month of April might be very tenuous, and I may miss a meeting or two because of my schedule. I did tell that to the board. I told that to everybody. And that day I was taking a personal health day because of all of the work that I had been doing the last 2 months. I didn't even think about anything else. So if you want me to dock, if you want to dock me for that, that's fine.
Nobody's docking
My
you for
question-
anything.
I have a full-time job that I do during the day.
I have a question. Who has the authority then, if somebody gets sick or can't make it? Who is it to be voted by the board to say he is excused?
Curiously looking at
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
And I
But then there's no,
find that, and I apologize. Madam
it's,
President.
I believe our bylaws say that they need to be excused. I believe it's by the
that's the
president.
president, that's part of your authority,
That's
being
what-
your
I don't
authority.
Your bylaws do not address that. as
Are you
far as
did
I
not?
can tell. I've just looked at them, and I know that our
There's
committee's
got
been
to
working
be-
on that. It doesn't specifically say who can excuse or not excuse an absence. There is a statute that does address the number of
Absences.
you
Yes.
can have, which
Yeah,
can
that
be
we know.
removed by the board.
Right,
But
nothing on
And because
excuse.
that's in the bylaws, we really need to identify what is an excused and what is not an excused.
Exactly,
absence.
and since we don't have that clarity on
Well,
excuse,
how
we
would it
need
be
to.
if we were to table this until
There's
this can be clarified and bring it back in the future? There's no rush on approving this.
No, and what
No,
we'll
it-
just do is instead of doing a consent agenda, we'll approve the minutes separately. We'll approve or not approve or put it on hold April 12th. And then on April 25th, the work study, we can decide whether we want to. What are you shaking your head
Madam
for,
President,
Joe?
you have a motion that is before this body that needs to be
You have
voted
to
upon.
vote.
Can
If there's no
a
vote,
tabling
then-
motion take precedence over a motion that's pending?
The motion pending was whether we were going
Go
to,
back to the withdraw the motion.
Yeah, you'd have to go back to withdraw the motion. Remember, we just talked about that. This is before the body. It's owned by the body now, not the mover. And so now you have to request permission of the chair to withdraw the motion, and the body would have to make that determination.
who made the motion to approve the.
Is the mover have to do the,
You have to deal with Commissioner Pollard's motion.
then we have to make,
It's been seconded, you're in discussion right now, somebody can call the question for a vote, Commissioner Pollard can withdraw the motion, those are your options, you can continue discussion.
Joan,
I will call for the question, please.
okay, could you read for us what the,
Roll call vote, please.
excuse me, just a minute. Would you read what the motion is? What is that?
The motion is to make a correction to the April 25th minutes to change excused to absent for Commissioner Spikers.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on right now.
Moved by Commissioner Pollard and seconded by President Norris.
You had someone call the question now you have
and
to
then
deal with
nobody,
that.
yeah.
Calling for the question means you're asking that the debate be closed. So you can acknowledge that, or you can actually vote on whether the debate needs to be closed. If you're not hearing any need to continue the debate, then you can call for the question, meaning close debate, move on to taking a vote.
Joan, did you call for the question?
Yes, I did.
Is there a second?
That's a non-debatable motion. She just means that you can ask now that the debate be closed.
All right, debate's closed and we're moving whether we're going to approve those minutes as written
No.
No?
you're gonna-
Oh,
you're gonna
'cause you
take a
made a-
vote on the edit.
on the edit.
Right.
This is strictly
So
on the
you're
edit.
voting on the motion that's before this body that was
Got
moved
it.
by Commissioner Pollard, seconded by President Norris.
Yeah,
That is the question before you, and you need to make a
and
vote
if
on it.
nobody,
All right.
then it's
He's already got a second. I seconded. So all those in favor with the approval of the minutes for April 12th? with-
no, for the
I'm sorry.
motion,
For the motion.
For the motion.
for the motion, yeah,
All those in
Roll
favor,
call
I'm
vote.
sorry.
Okay.
for the motion.
Roll call vote. Start with Commissioner Pollard.
And what I'm voting on here is the approval of the motion that as amended, is that correct?
To make a correction to the minutes.
To correct.
Correction.
Yeah, the motion has not been amended. It was your
I vote
motion.
yea, please.
Commissioner Young,
Nay.
Commissioner Spikers,
Abstain.
Commissioner Herring.
Nay.
I vote nay.
So the motion passes, which means you are not correcting.
No, the motion failed.
The motion failed means you're not correcting those
Correct.
minutes. So now you still have not yet approved your minutes.
That's right.
So that should be before the body now to approve your minutes.
You need to call the minutes
I
again.
move we table this set of minutes until there can be further research on the proper way to handle this, including looking again at our bylaws, at Robert's Rules of Order, and so forth.
Is there a second on that motion? Hearing none, then we'll go forward with approving the minutes for April 12, 2018
Call for the question.
meeting as written.
That's right.
All those, I need a motion.
You need a motion to approve your minutes.
I'll make a motion at this time.
Second.
What is your motion, sir?
Approve the minutes as written.
For April 12, 2018. Any more discussion? We've got a second?
No, it's April 25th.
No, we did it.
Excuse, we have April 12th and April 25th.
The one in question is the April 25th work study.
Okay. All right.
The one in question is April 12th.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Call for the question.
All right.
Vote.
We're calling for the question. All those in favor of accepting the minutes for April 12th, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Opposed?
All right, next we have April 25th.
Now, do
Yes.
we actually have to call the roll on a roll
If
call?
that's what you want, yes.
Well, it's not what I want. Isn't that the proper
That's what
way?
you request. Okay.
You do not have to do a division of the House or a roll call unless it's requested.
He requested it.
If
He
you
did.
requested it, then you must do that.
Okay, I guess I really need clarification. Is this for the work study minutes
No,
or the
April
regular
12th.
meeting?
Regular meeting.
Regular meeting.
Commissioner Spikers was at the April
Right,
12th.
yes, he
meeting.
was.
This is
There's
for
no
the work
question.
study
Wait, but-
session on the 12th.
But I'd asked, okay,
There's a lot of confusion.
She asked for the 12th. and I accepted it as well.
yeah, I did ask for the 12th meeting.
So you voted against April 12th.
Voted against what?
April
minutes.
12th, that was the
When
motion.
I asked,
The April 12th meeting was what I was seeking to correct, if that's your question.
Which minutes?
April the 12th, the work study session.
No,
No,
no, no.
I'm
see-
sorry, April 25th, the work study session.
Correct.
Sorry for that confusion.
Yeah, all right.
I played some part of that. too.
okay. All right, so let's start with April 12th first, and then we'll move to April 25th. Do I have, we're going to start at the front. Can we start at the front again? Can we-
Call.
Well,
No,
your
you-
point of roll call. You have to
Request.
deal with
He's
There's a
asked for a
request.
roll call now.
Yeah.
Okay,
on the
The-
Get
12th.
On the
April
12th.
25th.
for the 12th.
Madam President, you need to clarify, is it April 12th or 25th?
I said April 12th. That's regular meeting. That's what the,
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but in the discussion, it was clear that the place where Mr. Spikers was indicated as excused and should, I
Let's
proposed to
take-
be indicated.
Madam President.
Wait,
Yeah.
point of order, Madam Chair. Was the work study session on the 25th. I think that was clear to everybody.
I don't think everybody really understood that, but that's okay. What we'll do now is we're going to start with April 12th, and then we will do April 25th, recognizing we can't do that.
No, because you've already voted. Now, you just need to determine, and maybe Valerie can help us with this, but we need to know, you voted on approval of the minutes as written, and that was.
For the 12th.
If that's the 12th, then
Yep.
that was asked for a roll call. We'll have to go to the 25th after the 12th.
That's fine.
All right, so you'll do the roll call on the 12th, it's been asked for.
All right.
Then you go to the 25th.
Commissioner Pollard.
We're talking now about the 12th. Yes.
12th, correct.
I approve.
Commissioner Young.
Approve.
Commissioner Spikers.
Yes.
And Commissioner Herring.
Approve the minutes for April 12th, 2018, regular meeting.
And Commissioner,
Yes, I do. I approve for April 12th.
that is a unanimous vote.
You approved April 12th. Now you can move on to April 25th if they have not yet been approved.
Do I have a motion to approve the the minutes for April 25th, 2018.
I make a motion that we approve April 25th, 2018 work study
Do I,
Second.
as written?
as written.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
I would like to make the point that, in my opinion, that's not the way to do it, because that was not handled correctly. There should be a correction that indicates that Mr. Spikers was simply absent and not excused because the board president does not have the authority to say that he's excused. It's that simple. So that's part of the discussion. Now, if you want to go ahead and take the vote, that's up to you.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Did you make an amendment? No?
Yes.
Well, we haven't,
No, there's no amendment here. He previously proposed a motion that,
well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find out if he wants, because he made a mistake on when he did it.
No. Just move
you have
on. It's okay.
a
Okay.
motion
Yeah, it's
moved
good.
and seconded to
Okay.
approve your
Okay.
workshop minutes of April 25th. It's before your body. You called for the vote. You simply need to take the vote now.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
The ayes have it. Thank you. All right, next we have physician credentialing.
I move that we approve the physician credentialing as posted. I can read the names if you want. They've all been well evaluated by the medical executive team.
I second.
Is there any further discussion?
What are we voting on?
Physicians credentialing, number 2 under consent agenda.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's fine. Is there discussion? That's where we're at.
Yes, we're at discussion.
Yeah, it's been seconded, so there's a discussion. Sorry, I'm sorry. Let's move on.
Do you have a discussion?
I have a point of order or discussion, and that is that at one time we simply had this on a consent agenda. And the previous superintendent said, oh, no, you can't do that. You've got to look at these individual names and get familiar with them and get to know them and all of this. But we really are not getting to know these people. It's sort of an automatic thing that we simply pass this through. So I'm willing to see it on a consent agenda because, or the alternative is, tell us something about these individuals that are being certified and recertified.
Commissioner Pollard, if you look, it was under the consent agenda, but because we broke it up,
Yep.
it's no longer on a consent agenda.
I understand.
Okay. So we have a first and a second. Do we have any other discussion?
Can I just say, all of these people are well evaluated and examined by the Medical Executive Committee, which consists of some very educated people in that realm of medicine. And if they say they're certifiable, and we aren't going to get to know many of these people because, for instance, teleradiology is telephone radiology reporting. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. Is there any further discussion?
What exactly are we approving?
We did this every
The certification or recertification.
certification or
Now that's part of the medical committee report. Will we still discuss the medical committee report after that?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Everything.
We'll do it that way for a while.
That's fine. Let's go ahead and vote.
Okay, all those is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that is passed. Committee reports. David Spikers.
Wait, I asked whether there would be an opportunity to discuss the medical committee report after we certified the.
When we get
No,
to
Yes, after
we're following the
finance.
agenda.
Oh, I see.
We're to
Yeah, I
the
thought they were
agenda.
together.
Let's
No.
stick on the agenda.
Okay, I'm
Excuse
sorry.
me. Excuse me.
Sorry.
All right, Commissioner Spikers, are you ready to do the finance committee report?
I am more than willing and ready.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you.
We had a great month as CEO, Mr. Parker I had a couple of things you probably don't see in the materials that you have. We look at these things more on a specific, with the eye for specificity, I should say. And there were some questions that I actually had, and one of them, and then CFO Mr. Steve over there.
Yeah.
Well, to get to the part here that he actually responded. No, he always responds. He always responds. But it was he responded right away.
He did.
And it was about this amount of money in miscellaneous costs that we had incurred. It was way above the average, or way above our budget,
Usual.
I should say. And we were ahead up until this month. We were way below the budget. And now I can't find, there it is. And we're now over budget by about $11,000. And the reason is county elections, we finally got a bill. And it was like for $27,000.
For how long?
Huh?
Is that
For
last
the-
election.
this
just
is
the last
for the
election?
fall
For
election.
last
For the
fall's
last
election. This is for one person. Next year it'll be 50, probably 60,000, or whoever. If there's two people running, it'll be twice that.
Now, is that just for this board, or is that for any?
No, that's for all of
board?
the county elections. They split it up, and this is
Yeah.
our
They give you a
share.
Proportionate share, and there's a formula.
And I don't see how our share can be this expensive, but anyway, it is.
I'm a idea it was.
But anyway, that's why we have a variance of $11,000. Otherwise, we'd probably be, if you subtract 11 from 27, we'd be under budget by about 16,000. So anyway, we will be looking to budget that with a little bit more foresight, I think, from now on. But we never know when we're going to be.
You don't know when the bill will show up.
We don't know, but
The county is very
we
inefficient.
definitely have to have it in a yearly budget. Whenever, the following year after elections.
I
So
don't think I've seen it as long as I've been here, the 4 years.
I'm just wondering if it's for 2 years or 4 years
No,
or
it's
something.
For 1 year.
So
Usually it
anyway.
shows up later in the year, so it
So-
doesn't become so obvious.
And then that was my biggest concern, and the fact that our cash went down was because, as Mr. Parker explained, there was a 3 payroll month. Let's see here. We will be looking at our Snoqualmie Ridge clinic is below revenue, and we've had some medical leave for at least one provider, and it's been for quite some time. So I believe that we're thinking about, we don't know, we're kind of waiting to see what happens there before we decide whether we have to fill the position or not. We just don't know right now. We're trying to find out more, I guess, and it's a medical issue, so we can't say anything more about that. So that is why the 2 issues.
There's another issue with that clinic too, isn't there? The air conditioning.
Yeah, the air conditioning
Development of
unit.
facilities.
We're going to be. I think we are looking at getting what was it? Potentially, we would have ended up with a $12,000 bill,
The
right?
facilities.
We're going to discuss that in the facilities.
The facilities will
Okay,
cover
you
it.
want to discuss that further
Yeah.
then? Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
well then I'll
Okay,
just
thank
hold
you.
off on that.
Yeah.
And it's good that we're
It is.
overlapping some of the issues, so we're all aware of what's
Oh,
going
yeah.
on.
Well, obviously, the different committees have often similar jurisdictions, and
So.
that's the case here.
We have a high purchase services for the month. There's a variance of about $17,000 or $18,000, and we've had to do a lot of inpatient transport, and those costs can go up immensely depending. I know we were doing on-site for dialysis here, and now we're not because we have very few. It's intermittent, so it's not worth bringing someone in for a whole day and being charged for it. So we're doing, our transport costs are as you know, there's certain standards when you transport a patient, and it can be, if they're overweight, there's a really difficult procedure that you have to go through, and it costs a lot more. So, and depending on the fragility of the person and whatnot. So our transports, this is how fine that I'm looking at our costs, just when they go up just a percentage in a small area. But it's good because we're able to actually look at very small things instead of looking at a huge, big problem. We're now being able to concentrate on what things we can do to really make things more efficient and look and get answers to the rest of the board without having to explain 17 things as to the cause of one thing or the other. So I'm really being able to focus on good issues. So, and I did ask a question about the commercial AR rate, and that was brought up. I mentioned about a month ago, I think, and wondered how fast are we turning around commercial reimbursement, and I think that there's going to be an answer, but not tonight. Or is there?
Do you have an answer?
John, you asked about the clinic AR, and we're about 24 days on that.
24 days?
Yeah, to collect.
What is the other?
Huh?
Other.
24 days before we send out the bill, or
24 days to collect. Yeah. So we bill immediately.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the other?
The other?
Yeah. What is?
Are you looking at page?
This is the March actual versus budget.
Oh, I think that was part of the other, meaning the cost of the election.
Extra cost.
Election
That's
cost.
the election.
That's the
Oh.
election. That's in charge for the election.
Yeah. That was where I started out, and then
Okay,
it went
so-
to the other
okay.
costs.
So it's
That's
other,
a big
okay.
variance we have.
Yeah.
That's a big, yeah.
That's the first time we really recognized that in the budget. We hadn't
First time
recognized
that
that.
we've been over
First time
budget.
we've been billed so early in the year. Otherwise, it doesn't show up because you've got more accumulated in the account. We don't have much now, so it shows up when we get that big bill.
And then just looking at the whole picture of all of our areas, we're up in imaging. Endoscopy is up, or I should say, imaging is a little bit below, I should say. Endoscopy is up. They're doing a great job there. The average daily census is up. Emergency's probably about right at budget after this last month, probably. Clinics are below, are above budget.
They're above budget.
That's,
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
because of the hospital-based clinics.
Hospital-based clinic is very busy.
Yep. Rehab is below. We've talked about that for several months now. We're getting, I think that's going to change a little bit just because of the expanded hours. I'm hoping.
We are too, but we're also doing an analysis on our pricing model, depending upon payer class.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these are all things, these are things called fine-tuning versus major changing. And I like to hear the idea of fine-tuning versus having to do drastic measures. So that's how I look at it. Yeah, any questions?
Can I make a comment? I don't know how appropriate it is or isn't, but in the last year and a half. I think our staff and I think our commissioner that's been in charge of the Finance Committee for a long time have really stepped up to the plate and worked hard to resolve issues, have worked hard to find ways to save without risk. They've just, I'm impressed how quickly they've got things turned around and how we look now on paper compared to how we did when I started as a commissioner. There is no comparison hardly. So I appreciate Steve, I appreciate Tom and the executive staff and David's nitpicking. And it's right now it's all working and we're in a good financial position. We're not being careless, we're being smart and it's collective. It's a collective attitude. Wouldn't you say, David?
Oh, definitely. And
yeah, a partnership.
My nitpicking really used to bug Steve so much, but now he can come back mostly with positive things. And so it's really been a nice
working relationship.
Yeah, it's a great working relationship to be able to turn things around as we have. I think we still need to, I still am in the position we need to affiliate soon. But at this point, we're doing pretty well. So I'm hoping that to continue the same progress and keep fine tuning without putting too much pressure on staff or that nature. We still have to look at who's really doing all the work, and the people doing all the work are the people that work here. Yeah. And I don't do the work. I just point out things and I analyze and I point out. I don't do the work. And every time I ask for something, someone else has got to do the work, not me. So my hat's off, because I do get answers usually very quickly. And I meant, it's unbelievable that you responded within like 2 hours after the meeting about that question about the election costs. So anyway, that's it.
Are there any other questions for Finance Committee? Commissioner Pollard.
I really appreciate that where there are differences, significant differences, or even small differences, variance from budget to actual, it's in red so that everybody can identify that. That's very good. I have a question on investment income. Maybe you addressed this and I missed it, but investment income net of amount capitalized, there was a variance of 49%. And what is the reason for that? And then you might as well link that to other net, where there's a 55% variance. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
I'm going to look at that. I can probably tell you I know that we have just approved within months. We are now getting interest income on the bonds that we purchased. We decided to invest in some of the. So we're getting some money a lot more money than we were before. I don't know how much.
We're also looking at, within the next 30 days, a way to get a little more return on our what we call liquid funds. It's not reserve funds, but funds in the bank. And we've got a proposal just waiting to. Basically, I'm waiting to see the cost report out there and pull the trigger on that. Put a little bit more money on the money market account. So,
but our budget and our actual about 50%.
Okay, I'm trying to follow you because I don't know
page are you
where
on, Commissioner Pollard?
Right on the screen now.
it's called investment income net of capital, not capitalized. And Gene, because I am very careful with having enough money in the bank, we've been a little slower than I thought in putting some money in the money market. And there are certain regulations we have to meet. So I've just been a little more analysis than I thought.
Does that apply also to the other net where we're 55% variance?
Yeah, it's a whole $173, Gene. It's a sneeze.
Okay, very good.
Okay, yeah, and that's crazy.
It's almost like a
Yeah,
wash.
that's just a little bit of a.
Yeah.
Look at year to date.
And the other question is with respect to our long-term debt. On the page 2 of the consolidated balance sheet, where it seems that we're still now $94,978,321.10 in debt, which is an improvement of maybe $1.5 million, roughly.
Yeah.
And that's all. That's how fast we're improving.
Yeah.
Very slowly.
Well, it's
Yeah.
based on our schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very long.
Principal payments on our debt.
It has
So
been.
we can't, it's hard to beat that.
Well, I guess the thing that's still alarming is that we're that heavily in the debt, $94 million.
Here we are.
How are we doing in servicing our revenue bonds?
Fine.
All on time.
All on time.
Thank you.
It's all scheduled.
That's all.
Believe me, if it wasn't, you'd hear.
Yeah.
We have 120 days
Yeah.
cash, which is the highest it's been for a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Making strides.
We're well above what our required requirements are for the bond coverage.
We do, as you know, we do anticipate probably a Medicare payback because of all the cost reductions that we did last year. So that will affect cash at some point, and we'll let you know when we have those numbers.
Probably be early August sometime or late
We'll
July.
probably know before then, but we don't have to pay, you're right, we don't have to pay it till August.
Yeah, we don't have to pay it.
Question on that point. How can we avoid severe Medicare reimbursements like that you have to do every year?
Actually,
Repayments or whatever the term is. How can we avoid that?
well, it's part and parcel of being a critical access hospital on cost-based reimbursement. And that is when you have a year where things change compared to the year prior. And we had two things change significantly in 2017. That is, we reduced our costs and we increased our number of Medicare days. You're likely to book more cash than the adjusted Medicare rate is going to allow you to keep. So it's just part of the business we're in. That's what dealing with Medicare and cost-based reimbursement does. But we'd much rather have it go this way and have a little bit of the cash to hold and having the investments that Steve has put together and then pay back if needed. Thank you.
What we do, just to let you know, that we actually set aside this money that we anticipate having to pay them back. We've known we've become more efficient, and therefore our reimbursement rate is probably somewhere in the realm of, was it almost, I think it was over $4,000 at one point, and now it's 27, 28, 29. So we're talking about $2,900 per patient day. Okay, so if you look at 20 beds or 22 beds, and we get reimbursed from Medicare half of them, 11 beds times 30 is 330 days in Medicare repayment at $2,900. And if we reduce, we have to set aside quite a bit to be able to, that money is sitting aside, that million is sitting in the bank.
Over the years, have our set-asides been sufficient really to?
Over the last couple of years, they have been.
They've been pretty close.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions for Commissioner Spikers? Hearing none, we will move on to Medical Committee.
No, you
We have
need
to do
to.
payrolls and
Oh,
warrants.
Payrolls
yeah,
and warrants
warrants.
first to be.
Commissioner Spikers, are you gonna?
Yeah,
payrolls.
there is a request for 1.661 and some change $1 million in accounts payable warrants and over $2 million in payroll warrants and payroll taxes, retirement accounts and auto deposits, for a total of $3,706,789.08, which is probably about the highest payroll that I've seen.
It's because of that
3 month.
Three
payroll.
It's because of that,
Yeah.
but it's probably the highest I've seen. Pretty close.
Any three payroll month is going to get there.
It will,
Yeah.
but I've seen over 3 million, but I don't know if I've ever seen 3.7. So anyway, I ask to approve these warrants and this request at this time.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of paying the warrants as proposed by the Finance Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Okay. We're ready now to move on to Medical Committee.
Okay, I'm gonna make this fairly simple. They've been doing a study on CAUTI, which is catheter-associated urinary tract infections, and the data, we are now in the 3rd month without an event, an infection of that kind. And so we'll decrease micromanaging to confirm fully adopted into daily process. The Department of Health Cardiac and Stroke Recertification notifications are pending response. Harborview will soon serve as our telestroke neurologist via video link. We apparently were using overlay problem, so this increases the ability to quickly diagnose a stroke with their help. The Stop the Bleed program has been fully explained. They're going to teach it now to the clinic staff. The impact of molecular testing in-house reviewed. C. diff testing has decreased time in isolation status from 2 days to 4 hours in those who test negative, and sooner initiation of directed treatment. Friends of Youth is contracting phase nearly complete. Rural Health Clinic ready to engage a surveyor. Value-Based Contracts Committee to start in June to assure compliance and performance success. Wisha one-day annual patient safety summit to debrief. This is very brief. Discussed recognizing and addressing employee overwhelm, diversity and unintentional bias in the workplace, assuring no barriers for access to care due to bias, identify key internal assessments to be accomplished for discussion at next committee meeting. This, as Dariel said, the safety summit, this was the best Wisha conference I have ever been to in a very long time. Very, very good information on a level that some of us can understand.
Are you done?
I'm done.
I make a motion, oh no, we don't do that, sorry.
You need a motion.
Questions? You're gonna call for questions?
Call for a question.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Commissioner Pollard?
This morning I was watching C-SPAN, and the Secretary of DHHS, that's Department of Health and Human Services, federal level, as opposed to DSHS, which is the state organization, it's easy to get them confused, put forth his priorities for 2019. Top is dealing with the opioid abuse problem in the nation. Present time, last year we lost 64,000 people from opioid overdoses. We're losing about 150 a day right now. They spoke of it in terms of losing a generation. So he said there's a war on opioid abuse and everyone needs to get involved. So my question to the medical committee is, at some point, could you address what the hospital district is doing for its share in this war against opioid abuse? And other perhaps related questions of fentanyl and other drugs that are being abused.
I would like to comment on that, Commissioner Pollard. Emma and I were both at a meeting that Kathy Lambert hosted that had a lot of different people from the Valley. We saw federal government, we saw local government, we saw undercover cops, we listened to the local sheriffs, we listened to counselors, a physician and a psychological counselor, and they all talked about the Valley and how much drugs were going in and out of the Valley and what they were trying to do to, and even there were parents there that asked questions. It was a question and answer time. It was well done and it was very informative. And I don't know if Commissioner Aaron has anything to say about it, but I thought it was very well run.
Yeah, and the information that they gave us from all their own personal experiences as well, how they deal with the community, how, you know, the processing of those that may have some issues with. So the parent, the Q&A was very helpful because it came from the community itself and their, you know, what their issues are. So that was addressed
I
at
think
that
that's marvelous,
meeting as
but what
well.
I'm asking for is that the medical committee actually address this and give us a report on what the hospital district is doing itself. But what you're describing is exactly about getting everyone involved in this epidemic.
We have initiatives both in clinic and in the emergency department. We have initiatives both in the clinic and the emergency department, and we will bring an update to the next medical committee on those.
That'd be very good.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any other questions for medical committee? And we will move on to facilities.
Okay, now if I can only find my minutes. The minutes are on the back table. I am going to focus on only one thing, unless the superintendent, who is a member of the committee, has other thoughts. And that is the HVAC. Now, I think most of us know that's heating, ventilating, air conditioning. But just in case those people are listening on the recording or whatever, seeing the videotapes, when we say HVAC, that's what we're talking about. And the basic problem is very simple. We have been unable to regulate the temperature in the Ridge Clinic. It's the source of most complaints by patients and others. It's very difficult to manually adjust the temperature, and unfortunately, the building itself does not have a central HVAC system, or because we have divided up the clinic and partitioned it, it has altered the way that the HVAC works. Now, there was discussion about the possibility of getting some cost sharing with the owner of the building, and Mr. Parker has been addressing that and said he might have an update on that tonight. The idea is, if we're going to invest money into improving this HVAC system, that when we leave, we're leaving that there, and there should be some residual value that the owner might want to share it. Mr. Parker, do you have something to say on that?
I do, but I'm going to ask Steve to wait because I want to recognize all the work that Steve has been doing on this. Steve has really taken on the initiative with the owner and the property manager, and I'll just let Steve talk about the interactions that he's had.
We have been in contact with the property manager, who's been in contact with the landlord. We are going to get a proposal on if the landlord accepts this cost and we extend the lease. So then we will look at it and say, okay, we're paying X amount of money and committing X amount of dollars in the future, and say, what's the return on that? Does it make more sense for us to pay for it, or to have the landlord pay for it with an extension on the lease? And also look at lease terms that we will propose. We should get that, we'll have that by the next finance committee. We have been talking to the landlord on that.
Actually, there's an advantage to us in seeing the future lease terms at this time connected with this, isn't there?
Yeah, so we will see those terms and have an analysis prepared, and we'll come to the finance committee and the facilities committee.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Parker?
No, thank you.
That was very well explained, and I am not going to deal with the other items, about a dozen of them. We continue to make our spaces available to scout troops and various organizations, Encompass and so forth. They hold their board meeting here, and we want to encourage folks to let others know that we have space, and we'd love to have them come and meet here. So that's also attached to the report, which is on the table, and that concludes my report, unless there are questions.
I've got a question. I kind of noticed, and you may not get this, and I did ask in the finance meeting, but there's an item for construction in progress of $400,000 a month. Do you know anything about that?
I do actually, and we will most likely take it off the books. It's a very old item that our controller is basically looking at. It comes from a prior clinic we wanted. So it came up from doing the audit, so we'll probably take it off.
Okay, so
There's nothing going on.
clinic
right now.
remodel, which clinic?
I believe it was the Ridge Clinic. We're kind of looking at it. Some of it we just left on the books that we shouldn't have.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you
Well,
might
you
know
asked-
something about that.
No.
You asked the old guy
It was
about an
actually
old
before
dead, you
Gene's
got your
term,
answer.
I Gene, it was before your time. I hate to tell you that. So.
You got before my time?
Yeah, it was before your time on the facilities committee.
Wow,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
All right.
okay.
Good, good.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay. My turn, huh?
Next is Ad Hoc Bylaws Committee.
Yes.
And Commissioner Herron.
So the Bylaws Ad Hoc Committee met earlier today at 5. We always do before our board meeting, and reviewed, the prior meeting that we have. Our legal counsel identified that, and so as our CEO, that there were comments and suggestions that was received from 2 of the commissioners, and we are reviewing that as well, and will be the changes will be hopefully presented to the board once because we're still on the first cut of this draft. The committee also continued to discuss the desire to create 2 separate documents, that is the bylaws and the rules of procedure. Okay, and we do have that now, but it's not quite finalized. Still discussing it. We went over the other organizations' rules of procedures, and we feel at this point that we would benefit from undertaking a similar approach. We focus on the governance issues of the district, and last board meeting, we talked about what the board must do as the governing body, whereas the rules of procedures would be more as to how this process is undertaken. Of course, we identified its sections and articles with a P or O in the existing bylaws. We also identified some sections that may overlap to some degree and might be viewed as being both the bylaws and rules of procedures. So the committee was comfortable at this point making a first cut. And the initial draft for further review and refinement by the committee will be handled as well. Our legal counsel and CEO party also has identified that we have some additional specific bylaw changes, suggestions, some of his own and some from the ad hoc committee members, John and I. They pertain to conflict of interest, potential expansion of the Board of Commissioners, integration of the various committees and their charters and relationship with the bylaws. These issues and others were raised by the commissioners, and the committee will also be addressing it at future meetings. We also identified, legal counsel identified under Article 8, the construction and conventions. There is a section pertaining to public disclosure costs that we are, doing a due diligent work on that, especially with all the others that need to be revised, that appears to be out of place in the bylaws, possibly being more of a district policy. So, hopefully we do have the rules of procedure, but it is still work in progress. The same thing with our bylaws. Okay.
Any question?
Any question?
Do you plan to have a work study session on the bylaws at some point?
The committee has not determined whether that is something that we will probably in the future included so that all of us would be, reading the same page and making comments on whether, certain changes.
I appreciate the opportunity for people to submit, but there's something stimulating about the group meeting together with critical weight of the committee itself, because we learn from and we're stimulated by each other's comments. And so I think that really should be part of it, that we have work study session and take whatever's been suggested, but then let the board come up with additional suggestions and stimulate each other's thinking and so forth regarding future bylaws. That's a suggestion.
Yeah, well, your suggestions well taken. We will consider that and talk with our. Yeah.
Put that on the agenda.
We'll put it on the agenda for next.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a good idea, Commissioner Pollard. I'm in agreement. Okay, so now we are at old business. I have down nothing. Anybody else doesn't have anything? All right, new business. Resolution number 5410510, and that's surplus equipment.
I move approval of the said resolution.
What are you shaking your head about, John?
Well, we're just discussing new business. The action item, and you will note, is lower down on the agenda.
Is that a point of order?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So right now, is this being introduced? I thought that's what you were doing. So is it introduced for discussion?
Yes, it is.
The resolution.
The resolution is. Do we have a resolution before us? We do. This is discussion. Is there any discussion about this resolution and about the equipment?
How often do we do an inventory of the surplus?
Surplus equipment comes up on a really periodic basis. Inventory of all of our assets happens annually. Inventory really happens in two ways. One is the rotating stock that runs the warehouse. You won't see typically anything come through on surplus equipment. But then when we look at our equipment, our not durable medical, but the equipment that's here over time, and we look at that annually. But what also happens periodically during the year is a piece of equipment just kind of comes to the end of its useful life, and we determine it's time to either let this go or let it go and replace it. And we have two items on tonight that fit both those categories. One is to just let it go, and the other is we let it go and replace it.
Okay. And is this handled by the Mr. Scott Mahavic's department?
Actually, surplus equipment runs through our materials management director, Jesse Wade.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Why don't, like in this particular Exhibit A, the gas barbecue, just throw out? Why do we have to vote on this? If it's broken,
Give it away.
it's not worth anything,
No
right?
matter how bad the item is in its condition,
Still have to be
we have to look at
accountable.
the acquisition cost of it, and that's what drives us to bring it to you and say we're going to surplus it. And surplusing
Can't be thrown out.
it definitely could be just throwing it away.
Throwing away.
We need to let you know we bought a thing,
And it's
it
gone.
had a certain value, and now we're disposing of it in one way or another. Sometimes it sells, sometimes it donates, sometimes nobody wants it and goes right in the trash.
Or you can donate.
Unless I
Or
said sell,
donate it.
donate,
Yeah.
or
Where does the requirement come from?
Is it what we do?
As to declaring things surplus, even if they're junk?
I believe that's an RCW.
It's a statute.
It's an RCW, yeah.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Do we go all the way down to like pens that don't work?
No, not quite.
Expired medications.
I mean, technically,
But those are probably disposable items.
Yes.
well, the refillable ones.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is to the extent. To me, I don't understand,
It's
but
the amount of detail required.
Discussion's done.
All right, next item under new business is CEO compensation incentive plan for discussion. And I believe we have something, don't we?
Yeah.
Steve, you're gonna help us with this?
Yes, so we have a proposal from Compensation Connections. We have a representative from the firm here, if you have questions. And at, I believe,
finally.
in the beginning of this year and the last year, the board charged staff with looking at how we will develop a incentive plan for the superintendent, the CEO. And so staff contacted Compensation Connections, who we have worked with, and said, would you propose? They have given us a proposal, and it's a very thorough proposal, and to design an incentive compensation plan for the CEO that meets all regulatory requirements and looks at the industry and what the industry does in this respect, and will then develop a plan in connection with our strategic plan, our goals, long and short-term goals, and work with myself and the HR manager to gather the data necessary to complete this plan. The cost is $3,600, full price, not to exceed. And staff was very impressed with the proposal and with the experience of Compensation Connections. So that's the proposal we have for you to consider.
So did you just approach one corporation for this?
We
Or are there
interviewed
several
a
others?
number of firms and chose this one to give us a proposal.
Okay.
You know, I asked, is it Nancy or Shannon? Nancy, I asked
Nancy.
that Nancy be here in case some direct
Is there an
questions
option?
Okay.
that we could ask. Okay.
Could you
So-
say, I couldn't hear you, ma'am.
I have business cards for each of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I believe that there are local folks from the valley here too.
Oh, that's.
I believe
my
that at
next-
least one of them.
Both of us.
Both,
Yeah,
yeah,
good.
so,
That's
You guys
my
almost
next
walked here.
so,
I
Good.
should have walked.
Okay.
I live on the ridge,
mhm.
and my employee, who's also been working on this with me, who's had a lot of experience with this, lives in North Bend.
Okay.
Nancy, why don't you come up so you can
Okay.
speak?
Yeah.
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 So introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself.
Okay.
Well, listen, Actually, yeah.
Okay. My name's Nancy Kessler. I am, as you said, a resident of Palmy Ridge for the last 6 years. And I have about 12 years in HR, 10 of it in compensation. My coworker, Matt Johnson, who is the North Bend resident, has about 22 years in compensation, something like that. Both of these have a great deal of experience in this sort of plan. My experience is more on the base pay, but he is extremely experienced on this. He has worked with a number of local nonprofits and healthcare agencies and nonprofit healthcare agencies. So I also want to mention this last, but definitely least. I was also a nurse for over 20 years. I'm very, very familiar with the healthcare system.
So the question I had, which I think the Finance Committee had talked about, is it's so hard to put a compensation package for a CEO in such a setting that we have here, meaning 90% of our revenue comes from swing bed patients. A one-dimensional, perhaps somebody would say, type of entity.
Mhm.
We don't have, surgical. We don't have other areas that most hospitals do have. And so how are you going to be able to make a comparison? And how would you go ahead and look at the most comparable hospitals? I'm sure have some swing bed patients, but not nearly the volume that we do, as a percentage, that is.
Well, I think that how you make your money is not nearly as important as the goals and the strategic plan you have for the organization. I think that when you're talking about especially the incentive plan, what you need to make sure is that the plan is tied to the business strategy for the organization and business goals, because that's really the key to any successful incentive plan, is that there are specific goals that need to be met in order for the payout to happen. And you have I've looked through all 83 pages of your strategic plan, and I'm confident that I've actually picked out the goals that I would recommend already to base the incentive plan on. You are reducing debt, you're working on balancing the budget, you have occupancy goals, then you have customer satisfaction scores. All those are excellent goals to base an incentive plan on. If the goals are met, the incentive pays out. If the goals are not met, the incentive doesn't pay out. Because, and you can do it as a percentage of that, or you can do it as a percentage of base pay. Either one, they both work. It would be if you're our customer, so it would be your choice how you set that up. Probably working with the finance committee with Steve and the HR manager. But I think there are so many different ways that healthcare can be delivered. I think it's far more important that when we're talking about the person who's the CEO of the organization, that you look at the impact overall, not necessarily how the money's made. I apologize if that contradicts you.
Well, I look at it, I guess, a little differently because an incentive program shouldn't specifically tie up to our strategy and whatnot, but I look at it, is it easier to obtain these goals in this setting, or is it easier to obtain the similar types of goals in a different setting when it's a little more complex or maybe less complex? And that's what I look at. And that's something that I would like to see. That type of variable put into any equation that you look at.
You mean how easy it is to obtain the goals?
No. I would like to, I know you will be looking at other healthcare organizations, and I would like to see those healthcare organizations that most closely resemble ours.
That absolutely happens.
And yes, you tie it to the strategy, but I just don't. What my issue is, and this is the first question I had, is that I don't think you're going to be able to find another organization like ours in the country, and that's the problem.
In the country, everyone's all in the country, in the Puget Sound area.
Well, okay, so that's another problem I have with the way I think might be. I think that would be an issue with me. Being able to evaluate, I would want to see similar organizations anywhere in the country and then look at what their percentages are, if it is on a percentage or whatever. Because I think that our organization is different, and you're going to have to take a look at other organizations somewhere else in the country before you can actually. The Puget Sound here, this is not going to. It's not a good comparison in my mind.
Well, we can certainly. Well, number one, we're going to be looking at similar organizations that have a similar budget size. That's absolute. Number of beds. We can. I understand why you would be worried about the swing,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time, I would have to look into how that affects revenue, because I don't have any idea how hard that makes it to make revenue in a hospital.
Yeah, that's
I've only worked in large hospitals.
sure.
So we would absolutely investigate that. In fact, if you wanted to schedule time to talk about the difficulties, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah,
And we will, because we're working under the nonprofit rules for the IRS, we'd be looking at 990s all over the country for organizations that are similarly sized. And I don't think that they break that down, how the bed count. I don't think it breaks it down as far as the swing bed system.
that's going to be an issue. I'm just going to tell you right now, it will be an issue with me, and I'm sure at least one other commissioner. We need to have some comparability to a very similar type of organization, and I don't know how you're going to do that without looking throughout the country.
Well, I'm happy to look throughout the country, but it has to be a similar budget size, or it's not going to be out.
From your experience, have you seen anything closely similar to our environment, our situation?
I have personally not. Given that I know what I know about Matt's experience, I would assume that he has not. And I would also say that having run the compensation consulting business like he did for over 20 years, if he hasn't seen it, I don't know that anybody has. I have a great deal of faith. The reason I brought him in on this is I have so much faith in his understanding of the nonprofit area and his understanding of how the IRS regulations fit and his understanding of how executive compensation works. So we're happy to do whatever due diligence we need to do in order to understand how your hospital works. And I can't tell you right now how big of a factor that's going to be in what we recommend.
Do you have?
It's been a while since I was a nurse, so this is a phenomenon that's existed new since I was a nurse. So.
Do you have a list of healthcare or hospitals that you have worked in this capacity?
In this capacity, yes. We worked with the Providence Health System in Anchorage. We have this. I wrote it down because Steve said he would need to know that. Children's Hospital, Family Medical Centers in Okanagan. I've also worked with a couple of a very large clinic in Yakima, Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic, and we've also worked with an organization in Valley County. So we've worked with people in this area and outside this area both.
Could you provide us with that list? Copy of that list?
Absolutely.
I guess this is personal. From nursing to HR, what led you to that position? What drove you to become one?
Well,
Burnout.
not quite.
Not
We
quite.
just discussed that.
No, I actually was. I actually didn't like how nurses treat each other. That was the final straw that drove me.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that again.
Nurses don't like each other.
Oh, okay. All right.
And how I got to HR/compensation is my entire life I've done numbers in my head. That's what I do when I'm bored in compensation, is you do numbers in my head. And my very first place in nursing where we went and we were going through our classes, it gave us the formula. This is way before you had IV machines. And they gave us a formula to calculate the IV rate. And I instantly said that's too long and shortened it. And that's probably why I should have just taken the shortcut and gone straight to HR, but I didn't. So I spent 20 years doing other things as a nurse. But I like numbers. And
We're not accountant, I'm just kidding.
No, actually, the really interesting thing about going, I stumbled into HR and then realized that compensation was gonna be the right thing, and benefits hold no, I have no fear of benefits.
Or no interest in benefits?
Well, no, I actually, I understand benefits in a way that almost no one who hasn't been a nurse does. Because I get what happens after the person is insured. You know, then they're done that, delivered the care. And so it was kind of a natural, if I wanted to do compensation and I already understood benefits, the rest of it just kind of came natural.
Yeah. Madam President, are you recognizing us, or is this informal conversation?
I guess it's
Because
whatever
we're starting-
information the board needs to make a decision.
Well, okay, as long as we're in informal conversation, I'll just direct my comments to you. 40 years ago, I spent 2 years as a compensation analyst for a national laboratory. I've forgotten everything, pretty much. But one thing that I learned is what Commissioner Herron and Mr. Spikers are talking about is you got to compare apples to apples. And very frankly, we are unique. And it's not so much the bed size, it's the range of services as well as the number of beds. So I guess I'm concerned that you mentioned strategic plan. The one you're working with is a year old. There's a lot of water that's gone under the bridge since that was done. We need to do another one. And it would seem to me that it would be wise to consider your gracious proposal here, but that we do our strategic plan first so that we come up with new milestones that could be linked to compensation. And in my opinion, and the superintendent's a friend of mine, I think he's more than amply compensated at the moment. And with a debt of 94 million or whatever it is, I don't like to see us spend $3,600 unless we really need to. I feel that this board, the talents on this board are sufficient once we have a strategic plan in place to pick milestones and compensation benefits for reaching those milestones. I have a specific question, and that is, says the consulting and support services. What is meant by support services as opposed to consulting?
Well, we have Matt and I as the consultants, and we also have an Excel genius.
A what?
An Excel genius who works for us and helps us with
Excel, genius.
Excel, it's a
Excel.
spreadsheet,
Spreadsheet.
Okay.
It's an application, yeah.
and it changes a lot.
EPA system. But at any rate, it states here not to exceed $3,600, but then it says the full price will be invoiced
see
at
it.
project competition. That means it would be less, the
I don't
full
see
price
that
would be
36.
less than $3,600.
No, it
number.
means that I won't get a bill until it's done.
Okay, but it will not exceed $3,600.
Right.
That if it's not going to exceed $3,600, that means the final bill will be under $3,600.
No, what
It's in
it
this,
says
I was looking
that
at
we
you.
will invoice
It's not
you
in here,
full
it's in the, yeah.
when the project is over, and whether we go over or under our projected number of hours. If we go under, great. If we go over, you don't get billed any extra for it.
Okay, but the point is, it would not exceed $3,600.
Correct. No
Under
matter how
the,
much time you spend on it.
regardless of how much time you spend on it. So,
As the owner of the business, I can tell you, I promise.
well, I think that's a reasonable amount, but when the hospital's in the amount of debt it's in, even $3,600 has got to be looked at closely and say, do we need it? Is this the right time? Should we do the strategic plan first? Perhaps even do our own milestones and for compensation of the CEO. And so I feel that I don't have sufficient information as long as we're dealing with last year's strategic plan. In the meanwhile, I feel that our superintendent is amply compensated.
I would say it's up to you to decide yes or no on the proposal. And we would use whatever goals whatever strategic plan that was in effect at the time that we started. if you wanted us to wait until the new strategic plan was done. The other thing that I would take into consideration, and my recommendation would be that I believe, according to most contracts for CEOs, I don't know this for a fact about your CEOs, is that it requires an annual performance review. I would assume that you have goals that they'll be evaluated by. So if you're having to do an annual performance review, that's usually when compensation reviews are done as well. But it is at the board's discretion.
Are there any other questions?
If you were to be the consultant, what is your time frame to get all this work, the things that the research on different
Steve has a specific time frame in mind. I think when we first discussed it,
About 60 days, I think.
Something like that.
within 60 days?
which is ample.
Is there any other questions?
I don't, just a comment, and maybe this is maybe it's premature, but we need to have some kind of incentive package, and it should be done by a outside party.
I think you're right.
And so those are the two things in my mind. But this is not on. Is this on for a vote?
No, it is
see,
not.
this is not on
totally
for a vote today.
Yeah.
But that's my thoughts. And when it does come up for vote next month, we can discuss more about yay or nay or whatever our opinions are. But I really do think I'm strong opinionated about that. We do need to have somebody look at
I
this.
should do that because it's actually critical. Something I wanted to bring up, but you just gave me the perfect in.
Okay.
You are operating under something 503C.
501c3.
You have a letter that you work under, which requires by the IRS something called meeting the rebuttable presumption test. Meaning there's 3 criteria that you have to meet in order for the IRS not to come and look at you about how much you're paying what they call disqualified persons, people who are instrumental in the work of the organization and making decisions about finances. And the CEO is definitely one of those disqualified persons. And the IRS has actually been quite diligent about going through and making people prove that they've been through this rebuttable presumption checklist to make sure you're doing it. And I can read you, I brought a copy of it, but I can read you what those are.
Could you provide that as well as the list of the hospitals you've worked with, those 2 items?
Actually, I provided it to Steve.
Yeah, I've got it. I can send it out.
Yeah, I think all the commissioners will.
Okay. I'll send it out.
But it's actually what I just said boils down to the board deciding the compensation and or any part of the compensation automatically disqualifies you from meeting the rebuttable presumption test. It has to be a third party that has no fiduciary relationship to the organization at all.
How did we survive for 3 decades then if we didn't do that?
Well, I don't know when you did the letter. It was recent, right?
No, it's been ever since I've been here. It's because we have the 403B.
Well, no, we've never done this because what we did was just increase salary.
We're talking about 2 different things.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay,
But with that in place, you don't have to do it, but if you are scrutinized by the IRS, they will say to you, okay, we're going to assume that we're going to make you prove everything you did and every decision you made about compensation because you didn't follow what we said is the checklist you can use to get off of this. And having not gotten through it, great. And If you decide to do it yourself, just understand that you might be under scrutiny.
Would be doing all the goals that you have mentioned, all these other benefits. Where does the performance review comes into play with all of that? Since you are not part of the, working with.
I would assume it's part of your contract that you do a review.
So the board would be part of on the bylaws as well, right? So are we disqualified because if the IRS have to scrutinize us, and let's just say this is hypothetical, if the board assumed that compensation, are we disqualified based on the criteria of the IRS?
Absolutely. Not from the performance review, but from setting compensation.
I'd like to comment that we had the performance review of the superintendent, I guess, 3 months ago?
No,
No.
a year ago.
About a year ago.
About a year ago.
That's June, I believe. Or
Yeah,
it was in June.
The contract goes due to June.
The
Yeah.
compensation, or rather the performance review, if it's handled properly, can have goals and milestones for future performance, and it's typically the way it's done. But those can be done by the organization. Is that true?
Yeah.
And so that's something that
How to reward it.
require us to sit down and scratch our heads and actually put in a tough work session, but that could be built into the performance evaluation of the superintendent if we use the right approach. And
Just setting the pay or doing the performance review, because they're two separate things as far as the IRS.
well, I'm talking about the performance review. Okay, and then the compensation can follow that. But it's very important that the performance review itself build in milestones for accomplishment, and that can later be linked to compensation.
We absolutely do.
Is there any other discussions and questions? Thank you. Thank you much for your time.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
We all
Sorry
learned
for
something.
the coat, I got cold today.
Oh, that's good. What's your name? Nancy. This? For them, not really. It's not really.
Okay, moving right along, we have, CEO Parker.
Thank you. I have a presentation that I've prepared for you. That said, it is 5 to 9.
Oh.
And
Oh
you
my
have a copy
God.
of the PowerPoint presentation. They don't yet, but you will have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. I am not hurt whatsoever if you would like to review that on your own time, and then we can discuss it during our one-on-ones.
Oh, so we can extend, how long is it going to take? 20?
Oh, no, it's 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
That puts us at 9:30,
30?
and we still have to do,
What else?
well, that's.
I would like to,
Oh.
I'll even bring it with me to Eastern Washington to look at.
Thank you.
Because I'm on my way.
You're right now? Okay.
Yeah, I just gotta go grab the dog.
Oh, yeah, this is
I'll
good.
go through it with you in our one-on-ones.
Yeah, this is good. Okay. There we go. Okay. There is our compensation. This is good.
All right, on our agenda, that puts us to public comment. Do I hear any public comment? Yes.
I'd just like to encourage the board to focus on what's important and not worry so much about Robert's Rules of Orders or to go deep into things that at the end of the day are pretty trivial. I've become aware that there are some people out there that are critical of this board, and I've been pretty proud of what you've done. You've really matured over the last several years, and I'm curious if you've gotten your act together. And I would sure hate for them to be able to point to some moments during a meeting when things are going off the rail, when you're not really attending to things that at the end of the day would be really important. You're just giving them ammunition to do what I would think is something that's not in the best interest of the valley or the future healthcare. So prioritize, figure out what's important, don't worry about some of the other things, and do the best that you can. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, hearing none, we will move on. New business now is the action items, and we have none, except we do have resolution. Huh? Somebody make the flag?
The resolution, don't we have that?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say, resolution number 541 on the surplus equipment. Do we need to vote on that?
I move approval of resolution number
541.
Yes, that's it.
Is there,
I second.
all right, any discussion about that? All those in favor of the resolution of surplus equipment moving
Point of
forward?
discussion.
Oh.
Good riddance of this junk.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Pollard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, other, do we have any other?
Other, thank whoever provided our chocolate bars.
Yes, that was very nice.
And I guess we should also mention that tomorrow at 12 noon, or 1.
Tomorrow
I
at
have
noon.
other
Noon,
public-
12
I have
noon,
other
for 1
public
hour.
time.
Yep, in
We'll take
here,
it
in
about
here
the
will
healthcare
be
reform I attended.
barbecue
It's about the
delicacies.
healthcare reform.
So see you there.
So that's okay.
Be there or be
Yeah.
square.
Okay, we're ready to move on then. Next scheduled meetings will be a work study session on May 23rd, 2018 at 6 p.m.
I know.
North-South Conference Room. Next regular meeting will be June 14th, 2018 at 6:30 in the North-South Conference Room. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I believe Joan seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. We are
Thank you
adjourned.
all. Thank you.